It's been called the Teardrop of India and the Radiant Island. Sri Lanka, the former Ceylon, has many nicknames, all of which well-deserved. With its beaches, tea plantations and historical sites, this island in the Indian Ocean offers a rich gamut of thrills. Its 20 million inhabitants who speak Sinhala or Tamil have had a tumultuous and even tragic recent history. Yet they gladly open the doors of their marvelous country and its often unsuspected cultural and natural treasures. Close to India and at the heart of an ancient naval network of hundreds of trade routes, the island has always been coveted by invaders, merchants and missionaries from India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East and then Europe. Kandy, the ancient Sinhalese capital, remains the symbol of these multiple origins. It is located in the south, in the center of the widest part of the island. After withstanding Portuguese and Dutch invaders for 3 centuries, Kandy fell into the hands of the British in 1815. On this early morning of August, the population is headed to the temple to attend Esala Perahera, Asia's most spectacular religious procession, thanks to its dozens of elephants. It is in this temple that the country's most important Buddhist relic is kept, a tooth of the Buddha. This sacred tooth is said to have been stolen from his funeral pyre in 483 BC and brought to Sri Lanka in the 4th century, hidden in the hair of a princess. Over time, the tooth became a symbol of sovereignty for the various kings and invaders that succeeded each other at the helm of the country. He who possessed the tooth was considered the rightful ruler of the island. From the early afternoon on, the participants prepare for the Perahera. Musicians and dancers have all studiously rehearsed in order to be ready for the country's annual highlight. A few feet away, the presence of the ancient royal palace underlines the religious and symbolic importance of the relic. In Buddhism, elephants are sacred animals. Some that have taken part in numerous processions are even known by name. Throughout the day, the elephants are pampered before being clad in ceremonial garments. This one is Odiwapu. At 60 years of age, he's one of the most famous.
I've been caring for him for 15 years. He no longer works. He only participates in religious processions.
At dusk, and after bowing in front of the temple, Odiwapu enters a room that's specifically designed for his preparation and putting on his ceremonial suit. The outfits have been tailor-made by a multitude of designers. Between the embroideries, stones and brocades, nothing is too beautiful. The fireworks indicate the arrival of the sacred elephant that will carry the tooth. Once the relic is on his back, he exits the temple and waits until the end of the procession to march in front of the thousands of expecting people. The festival goes on for 10 days, and the last night is the most important. Thousands of dancers and percussionists accompany the elephants, which this year total 80. The cortege first circles around the walls of the temple, where a dense crowd follows the procession, which then heads towards the city streets. Certain elephants that have become accustomed even march in rhythm. The most awaited moment is finally here. Surrounded by several elephants and 100 dancers, the sacred elephant moves forward. Much like a king, the director of the temple brings up the rear. Outside of Kandy, in the quietness of the countryside, the town of El Pitia perfectly reflects the lifestyle of the previous centuries. Located in the heart of a tea plantation, this dwelling was built by the Panaboki family in 1875. Padmini Panaboki, who still runs the tea factory, decided to open it to visitors and transformed it into a guest house.
Well, you could call it both ways. A family house as well as a tea estate bungalow. So, but I call this a heritage home because it has a lot of history here, and so that is how it goes.
The Panaboki family was even ennobled by the British Empire in Kandy when the island was still called Ceylon. We now head towards the west coast and the city of Negombo. Once the site of rice culture, the fields didn't resist the seawater floods that followed the construction of a canal by the Portuguese. Today, Mutora a Joela is a marshy wetland that's home to a population of purple herons, cormorants, and monitor lizards. The swamp is shallow, and in spite of the pressure from nearby real estate and industrial developers, it still contains enough fish to entice the fishermen, some of whom still practice bare-hand fishing. This part of the island is Catholic. The Dutch and the Portuguese battled over the city, which was an important center for the production of cinnamon. Every day before noon, the entrance of the lagoon in Negombo bustles with canoes named Oruwas as they return from fishing. The catch is far from spectacular. It's often small fry, except for the lucky few who find crabs or spiny lobsters every now and then. The Dutch had a major influence over the region, notably through the construction of canals that connected Negombo to Colombo in the south and Puttalam in the north. Roughly 75 miles of waterways allowed them to transport spices and notably cinnamon. Today, these canals struggle to survive. At the gates of the capital of Colombo, people often stroll along them. From the 5th century on, Colombo represented a port of call for the merchant vessels between Asia and the West. The Arabs, Portuguese, and Dutch all had their eye on this island, but it wasn't until the arrival of the British that the harbour became a city, which was then proclaimed as the capital of Ceylon in 1815. The architectural blueprint of the city accurately reflects the style of its successive occupants. Still in full bloom, its agglomeration now comprises over 5 million people. Several historic neighborhoods have remained the way they were during the colonial era, such as Slave Island, where the Dutch would coop up their slaves. Colombo Harbour is one of the largest ports in all of Southeast Asia, and still an important maritime and economic frontage. In the harbour district, the architectural heritage of the city has been maintained and several emblematic buildings renovated. The Fort District is undergoing significant renovations, much like the World Trade Center that towers the city. At the bottom, the former Dutch hospital that originally dated from the 1600s has been restored and now hosts various shops and restaurants. Trains have always been an important mode of transportation, whether for tea or passengers. Once a mere secondary station, this station was built over an ancient lake and dates back to 1917. In 1864, trains would stop at the central station that no longer exists today. In the Petah district, the bazaar spreads over several blocks in an albeit organized pandemonium. Each sector has its speciality: jewelry on Cross Street, plastic flowers a bit further down, and clothing stores on Bankshall Street. A bati is a type of donut that people enjoy at any time of the day. In the late afternoon, families get together on Galle Face Green, a huge promenade originally cleared by the Dutch to set up batteries of cannons facing the ocean. When the breeze isn't too strong, the pier is taken over by the kite flyers. As we leave Colombo towards the south, the harbour of Beruwala is one of the most emblematic of this part of the island. Today, many ships return after a month-long fishing campaign. The holds of this boat are filled with skipjack tuna, preserved in salt. This is chicken of the sea, a nickname given to this fish, the taste of which is strangely similar to chicken. It is then dried and salted in the sun. As we continue on our journey along the southern coast, we come across a beach where turtles come to lay their eggs at night. In Kosgoda, at this centre aimed at preserving the species, all turtles are welcome, including those that were hurt by boat propellers or fishing nets. But the efforts are focused on the eggs that the fishermen bring back and sell for just a few rupees to the locals who eat them. The centre buys them for 10 or 15 rupees to make them hatch. After an incubation period in the sand of about 50 days, the small turtles go from one growth tank to the next before being released on the shore.
This is hawksbill turtle. Because we call it hawksbill, you can see big like hawk's eagle. That's why we call it hawksbill. And the shell is very expensive, you know. People use for jewelries.
A little bit further, we discover the world of masks. The Ariyapella Museum is curated by the son of the famous sculptor who created the eponymous masks. They are omnipresent in Ceylonese culture, notably in certain dances that supposedly dispel the evil spirits that cause illnesses. They're sculpted in balsa wood, which is soft and light. A block is first sawed off. An assistant then begins to chisel it. The sculptor makes all pieces from memory and without any model.
First, I draw the eyes with a pencil as a reference point. This mask represents a dance that we call Sunya Raksuni. We use it to cast away the diseases of the mind. We don't use any doctors here. Just dance.
As we continue to head towards the southern tip, Galle Fort suddenly appears in the mist. Galle resembles a European medieval town that would have been replicated in the tropics. Certain historians think that Galle could even be Tarshish, the city from which King Solomon would import precious stones and spices. But the general belief is that it was a Spanish harbor. With the faded beauty of its Dutch buildings, Galle is one of the rare historical cities of the island that is still active and dynamic. While Galle remained the main harbour of the island for 200 years after the fort was erected in the 17th century, it was marginalised after the advent of Colombo in the 19th century. As in any village, every available space is used to play the #1 sport of cricket, the subtle rules of which only seem to be appreciated by Anglo-Saxons. The 2004 tsunami took a heavy toll on this entire coastal area. The massive waves covered up to 2 miles of land, killing 30,000 people and injuring many more. but life eventually returned to normal. The island is generously watered by two types of monsoons, and no matter the season, the stalls are replete with fruits and vegetables. In the absence of refrigerators, the fish is offered fresh off the boat. Quite often, they sell it smoked. The cooks use it in soups or grated over salads or rice. Unawatuna is among the southern beaches that are popular with tourists, but it suffers from a phenomenon that affects every island. The rising water levels cause the progressive erosion of the beaches that tend to gradually disappear. Water is also abundant on the other side. Lake Kogala is the biggest in all of Sri Lanka. It's a welcome ecological haven where Nimil de Silva lives on a small island. His huge garden is filled with fruits and plants. Nimil simply helps himself depending on his needs. But his speciality is cinnamon, one of the island's spices of choice.
You need about 5 months to grow a shrub like this one. After that, I dry up the bark in the sun for 5 days.
Once sifted, the powder will be sold to tourists, generating enough to sustain Nimil in his Garden of Eden. In Ahangama, the traditional sight of these fishermen is becoming increasingly rare. The big ships cruising off the coast have depleted the resources, causing numerous small boats to leave. Yet people still come to this precious setting for a little fried food. Even further south, in Wellingham, fishermen use outrigger canoes in order to get past the wave front that can be very high on certain days. With the help of other fishermen, the crew brings back the boat to shore at the cost of a strenuous effort. An effort all the more in vain as today the hulls of the boat are empty. A little further south, Mirissa is a delightful beach. Here the tsunami was less brutal. The water only flooded about 500 yards of land, and nature has since then recovered. This is Talala, practically the southern tip of the island, and curiously a seldom visited backdrop, except by the few families that know about its charm and tranquility. In Sri Lanka, marriage is a big deal and a huge business. Families spend a lot of money on receptions, lavish parties, and entertainment. Today, an army officer and his young bride have the privilege to be accompanied by a renowned dance company. We now head inland and towards the north. The landscape changes radically. It looks like the African savannah. This is the Walawe Reservation. This national park stretches over 120 square miles around its reservoir lake. Besides buffaloes, monitor lizards, and other reptiles, visitors can also see elephants. The park has 500 of them. Yet, there were more than 10,000 in the wild in the last century. They've been decimated by the ivory trade, but also by farmers who wanted to protect their crops and habitations in the early 2000s. Therefore, their natural habitat has shrunk, not to mention the danger in the form of landmines being left behind by war. Today, the number of reservations has multiplied, and the population has been stabilized. Wild elephants are only estimated to be between 3,000 and 4,000. At the bottom of the first mountain ranges, the park is a haven of peace for birds. The cranes cohabit with the somnolent crocodiles. These are the first tea plantations. Its emergence in Sri Lanka coincides with the extinction of coffee caused by a leaf disease in the 19th century. The initial plantations began to appear in 1867 and later made the fortune of one Sir Thomas Lipton. The legend of Ceylon tea was born. As the world's third biggest producer, the island has strongly infringed upon its forest in order to favor the expansion of tea. The Sinharaja Forest Reserve has allowed to maintain a vast crest area in the heart of the humid zone. In spite of the violent assaults of the lumberjacks in the 1970s, the primary forest has since then recovered. From wild orchids to ferns to disproportionate vines, all of these ancient plants blossom in a forest under tight surveillance. The curious can even spot a millipede known for its dangerous sting. Lizards, frogs, and grasshoppers are all mixed up. Even the local viper knows all the camouflage tricks in the book to nap peacefully. And the monkeys certainly don't mind disposing of a unique pharmacopoeia on the island with an exceptional array of medicinal plants, the harvesting of which is closely monitored. Between Sinharaja and Ratnapura, the region is famous for its precious stones. Very rustic and far from being the safest, various mines abound. To reinforce the pits and tunnels, miners chop down the wood they find nearby. Afterwards, the youngest and most courageous go down the narrow shafts.
I usually start around 8 in the morning and finish around 5 or 6 p.m. We haven't found anything in 2 weeks. Sometimes we go an entire month without digging up any stone. It's all a matter of luck.
These baskets of earth and clay are stored for several days before being washed with water and sieved in order to find the precious stones. In the meantime, this mound will be guarded day and night. A few miles away, in Ratnapura, the excitement around the products starts to make sense. These men spend hours negotiating the price of yellow and blue sapphire, moonstones and other precious minerals directly on the pavement. Using a flashlight, merchants and stonecutters only need a glance to evaluate the clarity and therefore the value of a sapphire. What's most surprising is that everything takes place peacefully, without any guards or weapons. In Sri Lanka, tea is grown at 3 different levels: in the valleys, mid-altitude and high altitude, such as the district of Nuwara. The Ratnapura region, pictured here, features low-altitude tea. The domain of New Vithakundi was created in the 1940s, a real bet at a time when most plantations were located in high altitude. Built in the British style of the last century, the owner's residence overlooks the plantation. Navaratna Pilipatiya is the heir of the founder. He exports most of his production towards Europe and the Middle East. With 1,600 tons a year, he's been able to reboost the factory. The major concern of Ananda, his general manager, is to come up with ways to attract young people to tea farming. All of these female leaf pickers are old. The young prefer service industry jobs that are less tiring and more rewarding. For these factories, the bulk of the business is ordinary tea that's sold in bags and ready for consumption. It comes from large leaves, and its taste has to be identical throughout the year. For finer and more subtle teas, only the latest buds of the plants are harvested. This particular tea that will be sold in bags is ready to be packaged and shipped to Russia or the Middle East. For high-end teas, Ananda carries out regular tastings in order to evaluate the flavors of the current crops. These are the teas that certain high-profile European brands come to buy for their demanding clientele. A simple sip allows Ananda to perceive the various notes contained by the samples and to verify that they meet the client's expectations. Along with tea, rice takes up most of the cultivated fields. It's a feature of every meal, much like vegetable curries. Kanthi Kulathunga is a fine cook. Her greatest recipe is green bean curry.
I'm going to make a green bean curry. Here I take my fresh beans that I just picked and I cut them as such. These are curry leaves. Now I'm going to chop an onion and garlic.
Green.
Now I take green chili peppers, some saffron, and curry powder.
Curry powder.
I add a little bit of red curry powder and I'm going to let it stew for 15 minutes.
15 minutes. No.
As we progress towards the north, we reach the first high-altitude tea areas. At an elevation of 4,700 feet, Haputali is on the southern border of the mountain regions. The slopes are steep and often in the mist. A railway runs along the ridgeline. The train is still used by all plantation employees, such as here in Nanu Oya. The great majority of the workers are Tamil. It was the first British owners who brought them from southern India in the 1870s, as the Sinhalese showed little interest in the culture of tea. Today, the tea industry still employs over 1 million people, who often work for extremely low wages in precarious conditions. Nuwara Eliya is at an altitude of 6,200 feet. Dubbed Little England, the village was once the favourite vacation resort of the British and Scottish pioneers in the tea industry, who were seduced by its cool climate. Surreal buildings pierce through the mist. The post office is still active in this region that lives off tea as well as tourism. The district was long known for the culture of fruits and vegetables intended for the colons, such as salads and strawberries. Samuel Baker, a writer and explorer who arrived in 1846, chose Nuwara Eliya as his summer residence. As a great connoisseur of vegetables, he introduced numerous varieties. Around the tea plantations, these vegetable gardens have remained very dynamic. From May to October, the sky is rarely cloudless in the mountain region around Horton or Adams Peak. December marks the beginning of pilgrimage season, notably to Adams Peak, the highest summit culminating at 7,359 feet. Sri Lanka was inhabited long before the advent of the Sinhalese, or the Tamils. These early settlers, called the Veddas, or hunters, are believed to have arrived on the island about 18,000 years ago. They lived in quasi-anonymity for a great deal of time. Warij Wanalatu, the chief of this Veda village, is entertaining visitors. Faced with a slow decline of his native community, he came up with the idea about 20 years ago to have his ethnic group recognized by the government and to share its culture and customs.
In 1968, our chief started to lay down a plan aimed at the acknowledgement of our existence and culture on the part of the government. But it wasn't until much later that we began to showcase our village and to organize tours for visitors.
After a few traditional songs and dances, the Veddas head out to hunt. The meager subsidies that they collect prevent them from completely disappearing. We now leave the plains of the Veddas and head north towards the center of the island. We're in Dambulla, where the Royal Rock Temple is an iconic image of the country. The region has seemingly been inhabited since the 3rd century BC, and Dambulla is amongst Sri Lanka's important pilgrimage destinations. The huge 98-foot golden statue of the Buddha that greets the visitors underlines the importance of this site, the main part of which is located above, at the pinnacle of a 500-foot block of granite. Visitors must climb a series of steps in order to access the 5 caves. The history of the site dates back to the 1st century BC, when King Valagamba, exiled by the southern Indians, found refuge there and stayed for about 15 years. When he recovered his throne, he had the interior of the caves sculpted and decorated, turning them into magnificent troglodyte temples that the kings who followed continued to enhance over time. There are a total of 150 representations of Buddha in the various caves. The beautifully decorated ceilings have managed to withstand the ravages of time, in spite of the numerous visitors. The murals date back to the 17th and 18th centuries. At a distance of 12 miles as the crow flies, Sigiriya is both a fortress and a sacred complex. From an ecological standpoint, Sigiriya is the lava plug of an extinct and long-eroded volcano. At the bottom, the ornamental gardens date from the 5th century, and on top lie the ruins of a palace that overlook the surrounding jungle and plains. The palace was highly sophisticated and featured several pools, one of which on the very summit. As we progress towards the northeast, we come across another historical capital of the island, Polonnaruwa. Some 800 years ago, it was one of the biggest urban centers of southern Asia. Traces of this ancient glory can be found in the archaeological relics of the city. Only the bases and the columns of these temples and buildings remain. Everything else on the several floors was made of wood that was often inlaid with precious stones. For 3 centuries, Polonnaruwa was the capital of the Chola dynasty and of the Sinhalese kingdom. It reached its apex around 155, when the king erected huge monuments and designed magnificent parks. The site of Galle marks the pinnacle of stone carving in Sri Lanka, with these beautiful Buddhas sculpted in the very wall of rock. We are now in the northern center of the island, in Anuradhapura, another historical capital of Sri Lanka. Much like in all the cities of the island, betel leaves are subject to an important and particular consumption. Stemming from areca trees, betel nuts are chopped into pieces. Peddlers then mix it with tobacco and whitewash, creating a paste that people chew for several hours, which gives their mouth a red color. It also has a stimulating effect, which is why it's considered a narcotic. This practice is very common in all of Southeast Asia. Chickpeas cooked with chili peppers make up a dish that's often enjoyed on the go. But the main reason people come to Anuradhapura is pilgrimage. Created in the 4th century BC, it was one of the most important monastic cities in the world, notably when Buddhism emerged. Upon its completion in the 3rd century AD and at a height of 400 feet, the Jetavana Stupa was the world's 3rd highest monument, behind the Great Pyramids of Giza. The rectangle at the top contains relics of the Buddha in the form of a belt and several plates. A little further, the pools of Kutam Pakuna were likely used as bathing tanks by the monks of the nearby monastery. They were particularly sophisticated for their time, thanks to their water circulation system. The city's historical site is under permanent excavation. Buried under the earth and vegetation, the most famous stupa of Ruwan Welisseya was only discovered in the last century. In front of every holy edifice, merchants offer lotus flowers, a religious symbol. White lotus represents the spiritual perfection of Buddha. Once opened, the flowers are placed on an altar in front of the temple as an offering. The Ruwan Welisseya stupa was built by King Dutu Gamunu. However, it's been restored and is only 180 feet tall, even though its original height was nearly 300 feet. Much like its neighbor, the religious interest of the building lies in its reliquary located at the top and which contains plates that belong to the Buddha. It's a major place for meditation. About 100 yards from the stupa is another feature that's just as important, the Bodhi tree, or tree of knowledge. It grew from a branch that was cut from the tree in India, under which Buddha is said to have achieved enlightenment, and that was brought to Sri Lanka over 2,000 years ago. The white thread handed by the priest is blessed. It's supposed to ward off the evil eye for 3 days. Before they leave, the visitors light candles representing the teachings of Buddha and enlightening the path of the believer. Outside of the city, the second rice harvest of the year, after that in March, is ready to begin. In Sri Lanka, the most widely cultivated seed of rice is called indica. Its grain is typically long and flat. We arrive on the east coast in Trincomalee, along the Indian Ocean, a particularly humid area where the kingfishers feast. The beaches are back to being calm and appealing after a conflict between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan army devastated the country until 2009. But the wounds between the communities are still fresh. between 80 and 100,000 people are estimated to have died during the conflict. At the other end of the Trincomalee Bay is Swami Rock, a 430-foot cliff that hosts one of the 5 Sri Lankan temples dedicated to Shiva and built to protect the island from natural disasters. The temple was rebuilt several times, and people still come to pray on the edge of the boulder in the remains of the ancient site that likely dates back to the 300s. Trincomalee suffered a lot during the war. It is still under significant military presence, but its very active fishing harbour has generated a new impulse. The revival of the entire northern peninsula could well come from tourists, drawn to these new and unaltered beaches. And this is how we end our journey on this island that has recovered all of its serenity after a war and tsunami. An island with plenty of treasures yet to be discovered.